Howdy, folks, and welcome to episode 472 of the Dead Robot Society. I'm Paul E. Cooley, and joining me today is Mr. Terry Kiss My Ass. I finished my book, Mixin'. How the hell are you, Terry?
Did you miss me?
No.
Okay.
Terry was absent for today's recording, or last week's recording, depending on what time stream you're paying attention to, because he was on a deadline and he was sick and he just didn't feel like working and he just kind of bailed.
Trust me, you don't want to be dead sick and working on a deadline. That totally sucks.
That's been my life in tech many, 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 many times. So you will get no sympathy from me whatsoever, sir.
It's fine. I don't need your sympathy. I can accept the listener's sympathy.
The listeners are going to give you sympathy?
A lot more than you.
That may be true. So what the hell has been going on with you, Bubba?
As you said, I finished work on the second book that I'm working on with Glenn. It's off to the editors. He thinks that it'll come out and be published around December 1st, maybe a little bit earlier, depending on his circumstances and what's going on there. The ARC is out to the various ARC readers, so I can wipe my brow and go, thank God I'm not under that pressure anymore. Now I can go back and work on the Empire of Bones book that I was working before this all went to hell. I've only got like 2.5 weeks left of writing on it. It'll be done by the end of the month because it was 2/3 of the way done. I've given up on them actually arriving at Terra. Hell, I've given up on them actually leaving for Terra. So basically, I don't know what the hell the title's going to be.
Didn't you actually put in the books when the next book was going to be called Battle for Terra, or did you not?
I scrubbed that out. I did put it in, and I decided a couple of months ago, I said, forecasting when I think these books are coming out is a bad idea. I shouldn't do that. So I took it out. So while some people that have older copies of the books may see that information in there, the ones that are currently up on Amazon don't have it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Live and learn. The tentative title I've settled on right now is Raid on Terra, because it doesn't imply that I actually have to get there.
Okay.
Trust me, they're trying to get there. It's not their fault they're being sidetracked.
It sounds too much like Marines. Are we ever going to get to the goddamn ship?
Well, the one thing I could say about this book is I went ahead and introduced a major plot complication on the poor characters, like in chapter 2, chapter 3. They don't really have a lot of choice in the matter, but having to deal with it. And it took literally half the book to deal with it because it was that serious of a problem. It's going to be interesting to see how many people think that I've jumped the shark by introducing what I did.
And I know what you did because we've talked about it.
Mm-hmm. Now, to be fair, I certainly introduced the possibility of this happening early on in a very graphic way. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? So this should not be a surprise. People shouldn't be going now, oh, this is total bullshit, when I went ahead and had a plot element inserted 4 books ago that had elements of what I'm doing right now, and the implications were very clear that this was possible.
Right.
So we'll see how many people actually buy that story.
And how many people call bullshit.
Exactly. They probably got it on speed dial with my writing at this point. The other thing that I'm doing is before I even went and broke off working on the Empire book and went to Glenn's, I had all the files from Veronica Jaguar for the audio version of Behind Enemy Lines. I'm now back on listening to those, and I should have them wrapped up this week.
That's always a good thing.
Damn, she's good.
Yeah, she's good. Maybe one of these days I'll hire her again. It could happen.
You should. She posted just the other day that it's now been 6 months since she left academia to do this full time. And the subtext of that is, why hasn't Paul Cooley called me?
Paul Cooley's not going to call her because she's so busy she wouldn't have time to get stuff done on my insane deadlines.
I got something to tell you. You wave enough money around, things happen.
Yeah, but I have no money right now, so that's not really going to happen.
Have you
I
thought
have no
about waving
money.
a cat? You could wave a cat around. Maybe that might help.
I don't want to wave a cat around. Have you seen my cats? They have their claws and they're mean.
I've discovered over the years that cats reflect their owners or their slaves, if you depending on how you look at that.
Well, right now, one of the cats you can see in the blanket over there, just
Hmm.
a big black blob. That would be the gecko, which probably means the little guy is around here somewhere getting ready to plot some mischief because
What
that's
about you,
what he
sir?
does.
What have you been up to?
I've been recording Gares Inferno, which is going very, very slowly because life keeps getting in my way, and then also working on Destruction. So I had a couple of good days. I need to ratchet it up a little bit so I can try and get this book done. But we're 73,000 now. So
Hey, you're almost there, man. You're much further than I am. I'm sitting at like 60 some odd thousand words. So
I think I've got another 20. I think I've got another 20. And once I really start going into it, I think it's going to go pretty fast. We'll see. Because now I'm starting the end game is beginning. So the action packed craziness is about to go full bore, and that's when the bring out the body bags because none of you motherfuckers is going home.
I saw your hand hit your microphone stand. Is that the new one?
No, this is the old and busted. Old and busted. What I ordered was I ordered a new mic boom that actually sits on the desk, and it's scissors, so it retracts and moves however you want it to get it to in position to record with. And
Mhm.
I also got a new shock mount because I stripped and broke this one. So
The only shock mount that I've got for the one I have looks like an old style radio microphone. It goes all the way around. I've got the boom like this that's on an arm,
yeah,
but the shock mount would attach to the arm, and it's like literally this big around, and the microphone sits in the middle.
okay. Well, I've got a shock mount. I've got an arm coming very similar to yours because I've been using an honest to god mic stand for all these years. You know, the kind you would use on stage, more or less.
I've got one of those. I've got a smaller one that's like that sits on the desk,
Hmm.
and it was okay, but this arm is much better. It lets me control where I'm sitting at. Speaking of arms, one of the things that I got for my writing desk is a big arm to go ahead and hold my big monitor so that I can twist that sucker into portrait mode, landscape mode,
Portrait mode,
portrait mode.
weirdo.
Because I keep being lured back into using Dragon Naturally Speaking because I enjoy doing it. So I'm back to doing that again, and that allows me to show a full page of the document in the appropriate mode while I'm doing it.
Gotcha.
Damn, that thing's huge on a big. I use an old flat screen TV as my primary monitor, so it's pretty sizable for a Word document,
So you put it
which is
down at
good for
10.
these eyes.
You put it down at 10 points and it still looks like it's a large billboard. Is that what you're telling
Actually,
me?
sadly, it's at 120% so that I can still see everything clearly, but it's sitting 3 feet away.
Mhm.
But it does work out better than I had thought it would. So that was an investment that was well worth doing.
Yeah, I keep Scrivener at about 150 to 200% um, zoom because that just makes life easier for me. So I can lean back and put on my glasses and see it, or I can be forward like this and not have to use my glasses, which is even better. So yeah, it's a little shit. Anyway, I'm working to try and get all this shit done, and I'm gonna have to stop sleeping for a while. I'm convinced. So this may be a hell week for me, and it's Tuesday already. And of course, I have a meeting about the day job stuff tomorrow, so more work is coming at me very very soon. It's been a light month so far. And of course, because I
I'm
haven't put out a
so
book
glad I don't have that. So glad.
since I haven't put out a book since June, my sales are in the shitter. So I got to get books out. Just it's got to happen. I got to get it done. So
That's something that as a writer that wants to be doing this full time, that we all have to remember is you can't rest on your laurels of what you've accomplished. It's always about what's coming up. What are you doing now?
yeah.
Because while you may be riding high on whatever income you've got from the last release, you better be working for that next one because that's going to fall off a cliff in about 6 weeks after you release it.
And this all comes back to Destruction has been really difficult to write. It's been really difficult to write, really difficult to get done, and so much crap has happened since May, June. Um, Real life stuff has just completely fucked everything up. So I gotta do better next year. So the
What's your goal for next year? How much are you hoping to do as far as number of works? Do you have a target?
I don't have an official target yet, but I'm thinking 5. And they're probably going to be longer books. We'll see. And keep in mind that if one of them stretches out longer than that, that may be because it's just a bigger book. But I'm going to do my best to work on a couple of projects simultaneously to get some things done and get some things moving. And I've got 4 works in various stages of progress. So I got a lot of targets to go after. I just don't know. I put this on Patreon on Monday. I don't know what I'm going to work on next. I really don't.
Delegator NATO?
The signal decay stuff is calling me, and quantum personality disorder, the story about the AI psychiatrist, that's really calling to me too. And everybody who's heard my idea for that book has freaked out and said I have got to write that like now. Shut up and take my money kind of thing. So it's all these things are competing, and of course, if Garrus Inferno does well, then that's going to be more of a kick in the ass to write some more of the modern urban fantasy stuff with my Nephilim. And if that ever takes off, then the 2 Garaga books will take off, hopefully in that same vein, and then the Tony Down stuff will kick on, and they'll have 2 or 3 different series going on in that same area while I'm working on the Soul and Beyond stuff. So it could be cool. It could be good. We'll see what happens. I want to write these books regardless of how well they do. It's just going to be a matter of, if Garrus Inferno does well, then I can push some of the other works off for Sever Press and try and write another one for me. If it doesn't do well, then I need to buckle down and write a couple more books for Severed while I'm working on my sci-fi stuff that I'm going to put out separately from Severed. So that's basically where I'm at. Is I don't know what the next deal is going to be until we get Garrus Inferno kicked out the door and Destruction is done, and I'm not doing anything with it besides waiting on beta readers and editors and all that shit. So, and of course, then I have to record because Derelict Tomb will end sometime in February, so I have to have Destruction ready to go by February. So that's another reason I've got to get off my ass and fix this. Maybe I just need deadlines. Maybe that's the problem. I just need deadlines. So
I decided that I need deadlines. I don't like deadlines, but I have to have them, and I have to account for the upheaval that's going on in my life. While there are times that I can write faster, I had to sit down and say to myself, all right, realistically, what can I write per day, and how much padding do I need to add into that to equal what is going to be an average time frame to schedule a book release for? If I can do better, great. But if I don't, what do I put on the piece of paper and say, here's what I'm working on during this time frame? And I decided 45 days is the time frame for writing a novel.
okay, and you're shooting for about 70 to 80,000 words.
I'm shooting for 80,000 words,
Okay.
but my target is to write a chapter a day, which for me is about 2,200, 2,300 words. It's not hard to do because I'm doing this full time if I get my ass in the chair and I make the magic happen. If I was actually able to do that, then that would be a book finished for me in a shade more than 30 days, like 35 days. So it leaves some leeway in there. And if I get froggy and can do a little extra, do 3,000 words in a day, maybe shave a little bit off, it might be less than 30 days. But if I say I'm going to write 8 novels next year, then that gives me, if I stick to those numbers, no matter how I perform, then I should be okay. Because when I finish a book, I can reset the date and give myself 45 days from there to write the next one. But if I don't touch those while I'm actually writing, then I don't get these unreasonable expectations and say, oh, I could sit down and write 4,000 words a day. No, I can't. No, I cannot.
Sometimes you can, but that is right now, depending on what's going on and everything else, kind of unrealistic.
The problem for me is I have to pick a number that fits my overall behavior. It has to take into account the big days, the nothing days, the got to take Donna to the appointment days, the hurricane has ran over my house days, whatever it is. So scheduling 45 days gives me plenty of time to where I say, even with life throwing stuff at me, unless I'm actually really run over by a car, I should be able to make that on an average basis.
Well, see, this
And
is
I'm
one
going
of
to stick with that.
this is one of those things that we should discuss in today's episode.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
So with that said, perhaps we should go to last week's episode because Terry wasn't here, where David Wood and I discussed a number of things, mainly shit that keeps us from writing. So let's
I thought you talked about your masculinity.
that was never
Dude, I
in
totally thought
question.
I totally thought it was a different subject.
Yeah. So let's go over there and see what David Wood had to say. Excuse me. So are you NaNoWriMoing this month, or are you is every month NaNoWriMo?
Yeah, pretty much every month. It's, I think the thing with me, I did nano my very first novel, which has sold, oh geez, 50,000 copies, and all from a NaNoWriMo book that I thought that was just going to be kind of a get out of my system thing. I was going to try to write epic fantasy, Robert Jordan-esque type stuff, but I had always loved Cussler and the pulps and things like that. So when I heard about Nano and Lulu.com at the same time, and I'm like, okay, this is a way I could write some kind of fun little adventure book. I never succeed in publishing, at least I can say I have something published. So I did it, and it took a lot more work to make it publishable, obviously, but it did become my first published book. It wasn't the first book I wrote, and that was the first Dane Maddock book, which turned into a whole career in a universe and a Kindle world and all that crap. So yeah, I like Nano, but it just doesn't fit for what I need right now.
Yeah, when I tried to do it, I realized that I don't write that way.
Mhm.
So it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I was like, after 15 days, I was kind of like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going to go ahead with this book, but I am not doing it this way. So it's just not the way I do things.
Yeah. And some
now
of the
I'm
fun
doing
of,
it.
yeah, some of the fun of Nano for me was the community, the
Mhm.
boards, the forums, knowing you're not in this alone and supporting one another. I get that kind of support from one of my Facebook author groups. So
Yeah, I think that's been one of I think that's one of the reasons why Nano kind of seemed a little spurious to me after a while, for me personally, because we have this, because we have all the other authors that I've been networking with for years, because of
oh, you mean superfluous?
superfluous, yes, superfluous.
Let's say it's not really spurious, is it?
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah. It just doesn't have the same kind of pull to it. I mean, I enjoy encouraging people and trying to help them cross the finish line these days, but it just doesn't work for me personally. Although I think
I
now,
think it's the right thing for specific types of writers or people in specific paths in their career, stages of their career.
right, and if I was going to write something for NaNoWriMo at this point, it would probably be like a crime book or something like that I could bang out as a single contained entity, fairly quickly. I could probably, I'm sure I could do it. I know I could do it now. It's just, you know, a lot of the stories I want to tell are a little bit more complex than what can be done in a month, at least for me.
One of the criticisms of Nano was and still is, well, you can't tell people that 50,000 words is a novel. They can't sell that thing. Well, when TradPub was your only option, no, you probably couldn't.
Yeah, that's correct.
Indies who are making big hay in the 50 to 60,000 word range genre for that. And so, yeah, you actually can write if you're an indie, you can write a marketable novel, you know, in 50,000 words in 1 month. You'll still need to work on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's no longer, I think, accurate to say you can't write a commercial novel is always longer than 50,000.
No, and that's, and I, you know, I talked about this before when I was at a Balticon panel, and there were all these editors there from all these different publishing companies, and they were talking about, you know, the fact that as far as they're concerned, now that books can be shorter is a good thing because of the fact that so much of, you know, they were naming off science fiction luminaries, or like, you know, blah, 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 blah. These guys all could have cut these books down by 80,000 words and they would have just been fine. Instead of.
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody has told Dan Brown it's okay to be shorter.
People still read Dan Brown?
Although, but I have to say, the last book, an audiobook at 1.25 speed while driving cross country, so that probably added to my ability to put up with some of the stuff. This latest book I did while painting the house, but I'm still really struggling because we're halfway through the book. One little event that was cut short, and then he's been on a boat. He's really having a hard plot moving. But I'm struggling with this one.
And which book is this?
Origin. It's his latest one. Came out last month, I think.
What bothers you about his writing personally? I mean,
bothers me. Okay. Well, interestingly, my last episode of my podcast was Understanding Dan Brown, and it was focusing on, okay, we agree that he's got issues. Everybody can see that. But what is he doing right? So if anybody's curious, check it out on whatonwords.com. But I guess for me, I'm not bothered by the prose. I don't notice it because I'm a pulp writer. I'm listening at a high speed. I'm in it for his cool research and his plot. To me is the lengthy interruptions for flashbacks that really just don't need to be there. I enjoyed Da Vinci Code the first time because I was flying through because I was curious about all the backstory and the history and art. But I tried to reread it years later, and I forgot that every one of those, whenever he wants to info dump, he would do a flashback to a Robert Langdon lecture, and we would have to go into the classroom and hear these lectures.
Correct.
In this book, he did it slightly differently. This Robert Langdon attended, the host showed a video of Robert Langdon lecturing. So he still got a Langdon lecture. And it did fit for what he was doing. Things like, and instead of just telling us how they met, we had to devote an entire chapter to a conversation they had when they met, and another conversation on their first date, and a conversation when he took her home. Yeah, or just basically you get more power to say no when you're making money for the company. And so maybe writers get self-indulgent, but also I wonder if maybe the publishing house likes the thicker books so that they've got that fatter spine showing on the shelf, if that's even still a consideration. I don't know.
I've wondered about this though. I've been listening to I've been walking through some of the Stephen King books that I really loved in high school and college, and I'd forgotten just how much of that kind of stuff is in books like Needful Things and It. And what I've discovered looking back on it now is kind of like, okay, I can understand why people would say some of this stuff is not important, but at the same time, I'm looking at it from an older perspective, and I'm looking at it going, okay, this slows down the action, but you're actually getting a lot about why the character acts the way they do, which is very, very important to later parts of the story. It's just they're not brought up, they don't bubble up to the surface intentionally, they're just there. So he doesn't really draw an eye necessarily to what those events, how those events have affected them. But you, if you're paying attention, do get why they're doing what they do. So I think there's there does seem to be this sweet spot of narrative where you're either giving the character enough flesh on them to where it really is where you want to be. And I know a lot of readers that really love that kind of stuff, and that's why they like the longer books. And then there are other readers who are much more ADD and want things to just, bang, 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 bang. They want an action scene every 11 pages or however many words that is. I guess like an action scene every 2,000, 3,000 words. And it just depends on what kind of reader. And Stephen King does what he does. John Irving does what he does. Dan Brown obviously does this, whatever he's doing. And then there's you and I, and we write differently and everything else. I think it just depends on what you're comfortable writing. But I do think you're right in the fact that editorial oversight has got to get in there at some point. Otherwise, it just becomes a self-indulgent masturbation session.
Now, if you're going to tell me the life story of a character who matters later and the things you tell me are going to matter later, that's one thing. I need the life story of the janitor who's going to be on there for never ever see him again. That's where I kind of draw the line with some of Stephen King stuff.
Yeah, he does do that. He does do that. He will give you more information about a minor character. And I'm guilty because I did it in Garrett's Inferno to a certain degree. There's a scene actually does have a janitor in it, and get about 3 paragraphs about him. You get an idea who he is, and then I have him do what I need him to do, which is to show something that none of the characters know about, but it's very important. And it's the same kind of thing that in the Black in Outbreak with the scene with Terry and Justin in it. And even a little missive with Scott Roche's analog. And those are fun moments because you can basically step away from the action or what the focus of the plot is, and then basically throw in a commercial, right? Give everybody a moment to take a breath before you start hitting them again, and use that to set up something silly or whatever else, and then have it end terribly for everybody involved. But again, it serves the same purpose. It gives the reader a chance to organically discover what the other characters would not have any knowledge of. And I think that's why those characters can be extremely important, even if they're only in there for like a page and a half or 2 pages. But I am not going to go on for 30 pages about this janitor's life just so we can see him get blown up. This is just not the way I'm going to do things.
Yeah.
But you're right. Stephen King will do that. Stephen King will absolutely do that.
And all his characters think a lot about masturbation.
What was it? Peter Straub said Stevie's got issues with sex, I think, and that was back in like in the 80s. I think it was back in the 80s. Straub has no problems with sex. If you go read his books.
I haven't in a long time, but I used to read.
Yeah, Ghost Story and oh God, shit.
I read Ghost Story, Floating Dragon.
Floating Dragon had a lot of sex.
Throat.
Yep. And then of course Black House and Talisman, which he and Stevie wrote together. Mm. I think it's really funny we're calling America's Man of Horror letter Stevie, as if we're on a first name basis.
I'm just sitting here.
You're just sitting there? I feel like we already began the show.
I didn't say nothing.
In fact, this may be the show. As you said, we'll just kind of move into things and move in and out. Phrasing. I
think how many that's what she says I could do when I'm podcasting with you.
Well, I'm sorry.
Every 30 seconds.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to control it. I watch The Office way too much.
I've watched too much Archer. I'm throwing phrasing out there every 5 minutes now. I love the fact that authors will go at that. How would you handle that if you have a character? Do you include any of those little moments, any of those little interludes that may not have to do anything with the characters at hand, or you always just stick to what the characters see?
Character's head.
So you never like jump over to go look at something from a third person observer that's outside of that?
No, I never drift to omniscient. Never. It's always tight third person.
Is that just because you don't like doing the other way, or is it just no
Well,
need
okay,
to?
let me say, hold on, I'm sorry, I need to correct. I can go to Omniscient. Let's say one of the appeals of the Dane Manick books is they're adventurous and they're going to lots of places. So they might approach a thing and I'll give you a short paragraph about the place. Be Maddox's knowledge, but it's probably just Omniscient. So that's the one time I'll bubble out of it. But I do it just because I really, really like tight third person under. But you're right, there is some character development you can do more easily if you would drift in and out of it. But
I
that's what
tr-
I sacrifice.
I try not to do it much, but there are times when you have to, especially if you're trying to build use suspense, if you're trying to create those moments, and if you're trying to basically get in the head of a not in the head necessarily, but show the reader something that's going on that the characters have no clue about. You have to do it, and that's part of my bread and butter is doing
Yeah.
that. So it's because I like tight third as well. A lot of the author, well, I shouldn't say a lot. Stephen King goes omniscient as hell. He will go from the freaking point of view of a goddamn bucket, that has absolutely nothing to do with the tale. I will do that very seldomly, and only when I absolutely have to. And sometimes when I do that, those scenes get cut. They just end up on the floor. And I think it does depend on what you're writing and what you're trying to get across. If it's tight third person, or if you're writing from a detective story, for instance, you're usually like you're usually just in the character's head and there's nothing else. You have to find everything else about what happened from somebody else, which is part of the mystery. And that's how mysteries get built up anyway. So it just kind of depends. But in genre fiction, pretty much anything can go. It really can. So you can mix and match all of this stuff so long as you
As long
don't
as you can
confuse
find
the
an
shit.
audience that likes it.
Yeah, and as long as you don't
Um,
confuse the hell out of them, which is
yeah.
it's the big
I
trick.
have, because I enjoy writing funny and that I can be very sarcastic and humorous, I've thought about trying something with a really intrusive, really wry narrative voice. If it worked out, maybe someday I'll try that. But I think if I did it, it would be probably in the humorous bent rather than doing it in something else.
Yeah, have you read much Christopher Moore? Okay, you should read some Christopher Moore. The Lust Lizard of Calaveras County is a really good one to start with. Or that,
Right.
yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. He's really good at being sarcastic. It's kind of like Carl Hyacin if he took too much peyote. That's kind of where Christopher Moore is. But it can be a lot of fun. It's kind of like Douglas Adams. His narrator was all over the place. I mean, that narrator was in your face the entire book. And the narrator was as important as the characters for telling you what everything meant and what was going on and giving you this, that, and the other. And it worked. It worked really well.
Terry Pratchett do that? Did you ever read Terry Pratchett?
I
Or
read
was it just that his narrator wasn't tight?
as far as I'm concerned, the Discworld books, I assume you're talking about. I only read 3 of them, but if I remember correctly, that narrator also was intrusive, would jump in there and say something, but usually not while the main characters were on stage.
Mm.
It would be like a chapter after or something along those lines, if I remember
It's been a
correctly.
while since I've read it.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've read them too. It's been at least 10 years. So I'm sure if we're wrong about this, some of our patrons are probably diehard Terry Pratchett fans, and they'll let us know. Or
And heck, there are probably some unintentional ownership bits in my books now. So buy them all and check for me.
yeah, buy all my books and tell me how many times I did this, and then you'll get a prize. What's that? You'll have read all my books. Yeah,
Booby prize.
that's not self-serving at all. No, not at all. That challenge doesn't. Yeah.
Fantastic. No, either one.
So what we're talking about is writing stuff, David. What the hell keeps you from writing? It sounds to me like you've got all your shit together. You're working on three books at a time. You've got 40 something novels out there that you're by yourself. Not to mention the collabs. So what obviously you've got your shit wired. So you've never have any problems writing, right?
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Right, yes. Honestly, if I didn't have problems writing, I'd be churning out even more than I do now, probably. Well, I prepared a top 5 list.
Yes.
I'll go in reverse order here. Number 5 for me is what I would call the lack of mental downtime. Realized is that long ago that balance in our lives a lot. We didn't have something to stick in our ears that would allow us either to converse with people wherever we go or listen. We didn't have podcasts. We didn't have a lot of free content. And I sometimes realize how much time I now spend subtly distracting myself just by having the headphones in or something like that. Used to be if I were driving somewhere, unless I had a book on tape, but that was time that I would spend thinking and that my mind would drift, do things. And I think having time for your mind to drift it's essential to getting to writing each day, having some time to think about what you're going to write the next day, even if you don't have an outline. Allowing that time to work through the that are tangling up your plot that you need to work through. It's hard to do that if you always have a podcast in your ears or an audiobook in your ears or always watching videos or Netflix or TV or whatever. So I think being intentional about having time where nothing is distracting you so that your mind can drift and let your subconscious work on your writing. I think that's important to have. And if you never do it, I think that can be an impediment to your writing.
I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. I sometimes will put on an old movie that I've seen a billion times and just have it there for noise. And I'll close my eyes or whatever, and I can see the pictures in my mind, but then slowly all that goes away because the brain says, I'm bored with this now. And so I'll start thinking about, this particular scene and that I'm writing, or, hey, how am I going to solve this plot problem? Or, hey, I have a wonderful idea how I can do this. And then, I'll start typing down notes or whatever else. And pretty soon the movie goes bye-bye completely.
Yeah.
So yeah,
if I'm struggling, the best thing for me is a drive without any music or anything, because I guess my mind starts craving filling in the noise. I need to make this entertaining. So my subconscious, that's when it starts chewing on. Driving helps me a lot. Then I'll just record whatever I come up with so I don't forget it.
If I had any place interesting to drive to in this town, I would do that too.
Don't make it worse. No distractions.
No, but the thing is,
better,
it's like there's no place to go. Everything's concrete jungle. I remember when I was in college, I would go. I'd leave my apartment and drive up into up to Horsetooth Reservoir, and sit on this big ass boulder facing the lake and just think. Because it was beautiful and everything else, but the key thing was it was solitary.
Mm-hmm.
There was just nothing else out there besides the wind, the occasional car, and the sound of whatever was going on the lake. So it was kind of a neat place to be, and I kind of miss that. I miss having that a lot.
You got to come visit us sometime, because that's pretty much out my front door is like that, out in the middle of nowhere. The internet sucks, but
the internet sucks, but the setting is great. The plot's terrible, but look at the setting.
Absolutely.
So I too, that is number 5 on my list of things that keep me from writing, is also media, because media can be it can be used in several different ways. Music can be a background while you're writing. A TV in the other room can be on just for noise to make you feel like you're still attached to the human race in some way, even though you find them despicable and wish somebody would wipe them all out. Occasionally you just need to hear that. Or like I said, I can put on an old movie and just have it as noise again, because it puts that left brain to sleep. However, then there are things like Mindhunter or Hannibal, the series, or anything like that, where suddenly I watch one episode, I'm like, God damn it. And then I keep hitting next and next and next. And I'm not doing anything else while I'm watching it, because I'm seeing it for the first time, and therefore it grabs all my attention. It's a little bit of a difference when you're using something as a distraction and when you're actually invested in it. And when you get invested in it, that's when it gets very difficult to turn it off and go work. And
Yeah, for sure.
and if you have a day job, it's like there are precious few hours you have to actually do that kind of stuff. And so that's why it tends to fight with you on a priority basis. If you're a work at home slacker like Dave or I, it, yeah, yeah, there's not going to be any consequences, right? Except for those
Well, no
deadlines,
immediate ones.
the
Yes.
royalty checks. Yeah, yeah. It won't hit you now.
Yeah.
It's 6 months down the road when you're screwed.
Look long term if you're going to work at home. That's right.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure.
And you write at a coffee shop, right?
I did for a long time. Not so much anymore. Used to be, I was responsible for taking care of household stuff and driving my daughter into town to school, which is a half hour away. So that's mostly why I would just hang out and write in the coffee shop. But now I still do it from time to time just to change my routine. But mostly I'm writing at home.
Hmm. How have you? Was it actually easier to write at the coffee shop, or what made that appealing to you anyway to go there and write?
For a while, it was the different environment, just being around people, but not having to interact with them, which is my favorite way to deal with Paul. But change in environment, I didn't have the potential distractions at home. It might have been knowing that things around the house needed to be done and that bothering me, or thinking, I could, usually TV wasn't a big deal, but there was that possibility when in baseball season with a noon start time for a game I really wanted to see. So those potential distractions were there. And then guilt about things that were going undone around the house. Might not even be anything major, but something that I could do instead that I could use as an excuse to not write.
There's always something more interesting to
Always.
do than sit your ass in the chair and write.
But the
There's
funny thing is, once I get 10 minutes into it, writing is almost always the most interesting thing in my life. But that getting started some days is just really, really difficult sometimes. Cool.
Yeah, it's funny. Carrie will come home and I will have found my way back in the story, and I'll have been going for like 30 minutes and we'll have written, 800 or 900 words. She comes home and suddenly everything stops. Everything just grinds to a halt when it's taken me hours to get to that point where I'm in. I mean, just really in. And then suddenly she's home. It's like, fuck, I got to go deal with life. Damn it.
Now you're writing out in the house where she is.
Oh, she works
Just
at the
you feel like you need to stop.
she works outside the house. She's
I
got a
mean,
real
when she
job. She
gets
works.
home, is she physically interrupting you, or are you in a closed place where you?
Well, I'm still here in the study, sectioned off, but then it's like there's dinner, there's, all the other stuff. I need to go see if there's anything I need to do for dinner. I need to say hi, those kinds of things. I haven't got to the point where I just shut the door and say, go away. We haven't got to that point yet. But it's
I think my family prefers it when I shut the door. It's like,
thank God we don't have to deal with that jackass. Yeah, unfortunately my pets don't agree with that. So, but I've at a bar. I have a favorite bar that I go to, and occasionally, now I don't make as much money as I used to. I'd never drink, but I would go there to have lunch and I'd write, and I'd be able to churn out, 1,200 words an hour, easy. And that was in between chit chatting with the bartender and eating lunch. I still managed to get 1,200 words in like an hour and a half or something with all those distractions. There is just something about for some of us, and actually I think it's more than we realize, because I put a post about this not too long ago, not on DRS but on my personal page, and people went nuts talking about the fact they have the same exact routine of going somewhere else and finding that they're more productive there, because the house is like there are all these distractions. If I've got this huge computer screen in front of me, it means I can work and I can surf at the same time. Well, no, you really can't. You got to turn the surfing off. No, I can't have Netflix playing in the background because I get too distracted and put something else on. No, I can't have this. Well, if you're sitting in a restaurant or bar or coffee shop, it gets much more difficult to consume the media because then you feel like
Especially if you're a porn addict.
I was gonna say, especially if you're Terry Mixon.
I hope you're not surfing porn when in the coffee house.
I've seen it happen. I've seen people surfing porn on planes. Yes. Yes, those people do exist. It happens. So yeah, there is something about finding that separate place. There is some kind of separation there. I don't understand the psychology of it. I just know that it works for me. But yeah, I do think that's kind of cool too. And every once in a while, I'll get up from my desk and drag my tablet out into the living room, and I'll just write in the living room because I haven't done that in a while. I'll go write in the living room. Or then, hey, it's not too bad of a day. I'll go right outside, which is my favorite thing to do, is right outside on the deck. So finding that space is really kind of cool. But yeah, the distractions will freaking kill you if you're not careful, because we are in a 24/7, every minute counts kind of if you really wanted to pay attention to what's going on in the world, you would never be able to sleep because something is happening and being reported on every 30 seconds. And not necessarily, I don't think you'd be sane either, but there's so much, and like you said with the media, there's so much stuff that's going on YouTube, on Hulu, on Netflix. There's all this free content out there. There's all this paid content out there. Podcasts, yes. All audiobooks, yes. All those things that you would rather be doing than sitting down and working. So yeah, we've created a massive problem for ourselves. So I'm with you on that one. What's your next one?
Okay. All right. Number 4, desire for perfection. This is I think this is more other people picked it over time, that I'm writing pulpy airport thrillers. I do try to improve my prose, my storytelling, but I also know I'm never going to be literary. But even then, just worrying, is this as good as the last Matic book? Is this the one where people say, you know what, this guy, he really did suck after all. It took us a lot of books to figure it out, but yeah, he actually is a hack. So sometimes just started out, I wanted everything to be perfect, which was ridiculous. When I started by joining the SFF online writing workshop, and even though verbally I said, I know I'm not that good, I'm just a beginner, deep down, I really thought when I posted my first sample chapters, everyone would prostrate themselves before me. But lo and behold, I discovered that I didn't understand how to maintain a point of view. I didn't know about run-on. Well, I knew about run-ons, but I was sucked at avoiding them. I didn't know that you don't need an exclamation point every single sentence, things like that. And suddenly, and dialogue tags, stuff like that. Somebody's like, oh. And so I kept rewriting those first few chapters, trying to make them. And I would move forward 5 chapters, then repost them all, and then edit them and do them again. And anyway, it wasn't until I got about 15 chapters in that I said, screw it, I'm going to write the rest of the book. By the time I got to the end, I had improved so much that I rewrote all those perfect chapters anyway. So especially early on, the need to try to be perfect really held me back. And sometimes it intimidates you to the point that you can't even get started.
Yes, and I would say that the longer you go in a series and the more baggage that you have to deal with, depending on what you're writing, if it's not self-contained, so to speak, and you have all those nasty little plot threads you've got to deal with, it gets harder and harder to write every book in the series. So, and I've discovered that with both The Black and Derelict. They both have got the same problem. So, it will pile up. Yeah. Every time you add another complication, it's another thing that you can't retcon in the future if it's inconvenient. You still have to find a way to make it work. So you can't just
with Matic books, they're episodic, and it can be read in any order. I make very little mention of what happened before, but as I've gone on, there are these little things that come through characters' relationships that are happening behind the scenes and things like that. But I've always been careful not to reveal too much and not to paint myself into corners. And that can be frustrating for some of my co-authors because they'll want to know, they'll email me, hey, have we ever explained this? Nope.
And we're not going to.
And we'll talk about really careful not to box myself in because I want to keep this going for style for a long time.
For another 1,000 years, you want to keep this
Yes.
going? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, but neither of my daughters has any interest in being a writer, so I'm hoping a grandchild maybe will want to take it over someday if people are still reading stories. But yeah, I want to hand the empire down.
Oh boy, yikes! I'm terrified. I think that there is a lot to worry about with the perfection problem. It can get to a point where it freezes you. Destruction has been really difficult for me to finish because I'm trying to find the perfect ending, because everybody's like, man, you've really set this up, you better close it well. And it's like, fuck. So then you start second guessing, which is another on my list.
Yeah.
This actually goes into the absolute terror category too, of you are so terrified of what you've set up about not being able to pull it off, not being able to make it work in a sane, logical manner that is going to honor all of the crazy that you and all the time that you've put into this, because you want people to say when they finish the book, holy shit, that was awesome, I want to go read what else he's done. That's what you want them to say. You do not want them to get to the end of the series and go, I'm never reading anything by this asshole again, because they phoned it in or whatever else.
But here's the paradox. Oftentimes the ones that you think the readers won't be blown away by, the ideas that you just poured out as you, and the things that we think are going to blow them away sometimes are just like, that was okay. So yeah, sometimes we need some, if that makes sense.
It does. I just think it's one of those problems that keeps, cropping up. And I think it just goes back to, writing, writing what you write. Like I've said before, if I had to do it over again, I would not have written Derelict the way I did, because it's been such a pain in the ass. But when you start doing these long series or sagas or whatever else, and you have to do the kinds of things that Peter F. Hamilton did in Nightstone trilogy, and I think that thing is like 3,000 pages long, something like that. It's huge. It's massive. You put all three
one
books
Brandon
together.
Sanderson novel.
Yeah, it basically, the size of an average Brandon Sanderson novel. There's a lot that you got to look at. There's a lot of things you have to keep track of, and basically putting down anything new runs the risk of being a problem for the stuff you've already established, and that can make it very difficult. And so I'm kind of more to your point now, and understand what you guys are saying about the explain as little as you have to, or put as little as you have to in there, and leave some things a mystery and just walk away from them. Maybe you'll take them up in another book. And that's kind of the freedom that you have as a writer, is you do have that luxury, depending on how you write it, to basically say, we're going to set this up and not deal with it now. We'll deal with it later, but we will deal with it. You will have to deal with it at some point. Well, your readers are going to say that anyway. Some of them
will. Some just
some will definitely. They will insist
the more
that you
sciencey
explain.
you get,
Yes.
or building a fantasy world that needs a lot of rules, it's definitely, there's a lot more expectation there, I think.
The more science that you put in your fiction, how dare you put science in your fiction, you have to get real creative on being a stickler for what you've established.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the same thing with fantasy. If those rules are there, you better abide by them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if they're broken, you need to explain how they're broken. You can't just break them.
That's where J.K. Rowling struggled, I think. She started out writing fun little magic stories, and as her stories grew up with the readers wanted more, and they wanted more information. And by the last, having them follow certain magical rules that really don't, they contradict some of the earlier stuff, or just don't quite make sense with some of the earlier stuff she's done, because she didn't have that system in place. She was just winging it as she went. Still amazing books.
Yeah,
she really struggled.
But also, I would say the reasons why she did that, though, is because the trying to put those rules in the age group she was targeting wouldn't have worked. the kids 11, 12, they don't give a shit. They just they just know that magic works. That's all they care about.
Right. The books were growing up with the readers, and the readers' expectations started to expand.
Right. Exactly. And then you either handle it well or you don't. But if you want them to grow with your writing and keep seeing you as being relevant and not writing the same, story for 11-year-olds, then yeah, you have to kind of evolve everything. So my hat's off to her for what she accomplished, because I thought she did it really, really well. But yeah, there's always going to be little nits to pick there, buddy. So yeah, that would be number 4 on my list. Absolute freaking terror. So.
All right. Okay. Well, number 3 on mine is just plain laziness. And this, we all struggle with it sometimes, including me. If you listen to my podcast, you'll get tired of hearing me talk about 8 minutes, because I discovered that if I write fast for 8 minutes and just write, I do on average 225 words. Sometimes I hit 250. There's a day that I just don't want to write. I've got 8 million excuses, or anxiety and family life, or what. Anyway, I know that if I just do 8 minutes, I can do 200 some words. And then I remembered how many years I spent in writers forums and Facebook writers groups, so proud of the 108 words I did today, or man, I labored over these 200 words. And I finally realized it's not much. Yes, it might have been an emotional drain to get there because I made it so, but realistically, and I'm producing 200 words a day, I'm a lazy bastard. Because that's 8 minutes. That's 8 minutes of hard work. It probably makes people upset sometimes when I talk about this, but the reality is, if we were to stopwatch our writing and really measure how much of it is just sitting there saying, I don't wanna, and how much is spent thinking about the things that we weren't ready to do, how much is spent agonizing, and then how much we actually, the keyboards, we're not doing a lot of keyboard tapping. And they are pretty lazy, I think, deep down. I don't know. We have a lot of lazy moments.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yes,
no clue.
Yeah. But even you can make the argument that I'm lazier, because I could be cranking out more words than I do, but I typically don't do more than 3,000 before I bump over to other publishing tasks. And some days I don't even get that many. If I've got like audiobooks to proof or things like that, or ad campaigns or more other publishing related things, I run a small house. I might not even get that many, but if I were just to write straight through for an 8-hour day, I'd have a Nathan Lowell kind of day.
That's where things get kind of crazy. We had Terry's co-author on here, and he was saying that the way he's able to storm through things is he writes for 30 minutes, the timer goes off, and then he plays video games for 30 minutes. And then a bell goes off and he goes back to writing for 30 minutes. I like that idea. I have not been able to put it in practice, so to speak, but I like that idea. And I do force myself to get up every once in a while, especially when I'm on a roll. I'll be looking at something going, I need a cup of coffee. And I go in there to get a cup of coffee, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to do the dishes. And then I'm going to take the dog outside. And then I'm going to read a news story. And then I'm going to get my ass back in front of the keyboard. So
getting back is the key. And I think pick whatever time frame doesn't seem insurmountable to you. For Terry's co-author, it's 30 minutes. It would be 8 to 15. And so if you're battling laziness that day, start with a small goal, but write as fast as you can. So because I think if you get 10 minutes into it, like I said, suddenly most of the time I'm loving writing again. Agonize over getting started that really kills us.
It is the problem. And some scenes you come up against them and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And you sit there and you just stare at it and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And so you have basically 3 options. You have 3 options, which is ignore that scene and go write the next one, which will sometimes tell you how that scene needs to be written. Completely not write that scene. Or sit there and bitch about it. So, do one of the 3. And I don't recommend the third option because it doesn't really help you get anywhere. So,
Well, I would add option 4, just blow through it, and it's probably not going to be half-assed when you go back and look at it. And even if it was your best effort, you're going to edit it and revise it anyway.
yeah, option 4 is really, really tough, but I've done that sometimes where I'll put like 200 words in and that's it for that chapter.
Mhm.
And it's like just sentences about what happened with no real here's what has to happen here. So and so said blah 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 and blah 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 and blah blah blah. Okay, done with that chapter. Next. And then yes, you do know you have to go back and do that. And I've occasionally sent manuscripts to editors and forgotten to go back and check those particular scenes, and they're like, "What the hell is this? What is this crap?" So it is one of those little strategies that you can use, and you just like Terry said, you have to give yourself you have to give yourself permission to suck. I mean, there are going to be some bad words, some bad sentences. But when I do them, I know I've done them. I highlight them, add a comment saying this sucks, and I move on.
If you have a choice between allowing yourself to suck and allowing yourself to do nothing, people will choose the lazy half of it and say, well, I allow myself not to do anything because they can't tolerate the idea of allowing themselves to suck. At least allowing yourself to suck will put words on the page better than we think we are. So I would encourage people to default toward allowing yourself to be lazy.
Yeah, I agree. All right, that was your number 3.
So what was yours?
My number 3 was second guessing myself. That is such a problem because you'll be like, is this really the right thing to do for this? How is that going to fit with this? Or isn't this kind of stupid and silly? Blah, blah, blah. And you can find 1,000 reasons why this particular thing, you should do it some other way. And therefore you don't write anything. So
or stop writing because you're afraid you're going down the wrong path, or you keep going back and writing that other part over again as you second guess it.
Yeah. And that becomes a real problem.
Still.
And that becomes a real issue because it really can lead you into this analysis paralysis is what we called it in software. And it's the same thing in writing. It's one of those deals where I think that's why I can't ever really be an outliner, a strict outliner, because my brain will not work that way. I can put it down and then like halfway through the book, I'll be like, this is bullshit. We're not doing this. we're going this other direction.
My outline 0.5 or draft 0.5 outline might work for you because I start with the bullet points and the general idea, and then it fleshes out, and then I'm writing and stuff. That process, that's when I do my pantsing. Second guess and rethink and plan again, and it's a hell of a lot easier to fix an outline than it is to rewrite books. So that's why I've gravitated toward that. I still get my cool ideas, but I do it in the outlining stage, and each outline gets a little heavier duty.
My usual tactic these days is to add chapters in Scrivener with just a title, no synopsis, just a title. One title I was working on the other day was Talby breaks something, and I was like, the hell is Talby? Oh yeah, he needs to have an emotional reaction and go bust something. Got it. And that's all I needed. That's all I needed was that there. And then there's another one, I think Gunny hates life or something like that. And it's just little stuff like that. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's what I need to get this across to move this in that direction. But I only do it like a few chapters ahead. And that's because at that time, that's how I see where that story is going. And quite often I end up deleting those things. And then adding new ones. And it just keeps going until the book is done. So I outline a little bit ahead, but they're not really strict outlines. It's just more or less the touchstones that I need to get to where I need to go, I think, at that time, at that moment, because that's all I know is at that moment. I don't know how I think I know how Derelict is going to end, but I don't know for sure. So we'll see when we get there. And that's the other thing. I have to be able to say, Paul, just trust what your brain is doing. And as Terry likes to say, no words are wasted words. if you have to rewrite these portions, so the fuck what? It's a lot easier to
Mhm.
rewrite when the book is done as opposed to constantly masturbating over, 3 chapters because you can't get the way you want it.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's
I used to plan my stories that way, with the exception that I knew most of the locations and I had a pretty good idea of where they were going to go at the end and what they were going to find. But yeah, everything was discovery a few chapters ahead. A couple books in a row where I decided late to make too many changes. One of the problems, one of the great problems about what I do is there's so much research involved. Cathedral, and all I'm looking for is exactly what it looks like on the inside and what interesting thing I could show the reader to give it some authenticity. But I'll invariably just shocking already done that I never dreamed would be there. I moved toward the outline thing. Just I got sick of doing the reworking and rewriting and restructuring that sometimes happened. I made awesome discoveries 2/3 of the book as I was, elaborating my descriptions or whatever. So that works better for me.
the research bug is a really tough one. When you're I can go down so many rabbit holes when I'm writing the Garaga stuff. I can go down so many rabbit holes when I'm writing anything sciencey. It is so easy to want to talk about fusing quarks now. I saw that article and was like, I have to know everything about this right now. And it was like, oh, I'm going down a link whirlwind. Oh shit, I'm gonna be lost. But look at all this cool stuff I can include in my stories that no one's gonna give a shit. Damn it. And then it's like flip over,
Get in.
You
I
what now?
spent, or the stuff doesn't even make it into the story.
Yes.
You know it, and it
Yes.
informs your writing. I don't know how much time I spent researching Colonial Williamsburg at the end of last week for what's going to end up to be maybe 3 chapters. And I've been there 2 or 3 times, so I know Williamsburg well, but it's just fun. And so
It's just so accessible now. I mean, back in the old days,
it happens.
you would go to the library and it would take you 6 hours maybe to find what you were looking for. You'd learn lots of really interesting shit while you were getting there, but it was more of a chore. Now with the internet, it's like type in a key phrase and man, what comes back at you? You're like,
Yeah.
now I have to figure out what of this is actually real.
Mhm.
So and of course all the bullshit's right there at your fingertips. So it makes life a hell of a lot more interesting. But the research rabbit hole, oh yeah, I've been there. I've gone down it, and it's given me ideas for other stories. And some things my editor Sue has cut because she's like, "This is really cool. This belongs in another book, asshole. Move on. Cut this chapter. Move on." So it just you just have to kind
This
of.
belongs in deleted scenes.
This belongs in deleted scenes.
Deleted scenes for your patrons.
Yeah, I thought about that. Putting together the uncut, unexpurgated, untouched version of a manuscript so you can see just how bad I really do suck. Before I start my other pass and editing and all that garbage. So yeah, that'd be kind of fun. Patrons, you want that? All right. So what was your number 3?
That mine was laziness.
Yeah, mine was
Okay,
second
so I think
guessing. Now we're on what, number 2?
number 2. All right, for mine, it is belief in the existence of the muse or belief in writer's block. Now, if we want to use those terms, like if we want to use writer's days when we refuse to work for whatever reason, okay, or we really, really, really don't feel like it. If we want to use the muse as a term to describe that when things are really going well, that's fine. But belief that some external force is stopping us from writing, and it's counterproductive. Realistically, I have the exact same tools at my disposal on a day where I really, really, really don't want to write, because from our emotional states, we are using our mental processes. We're combining the things we've learned about how to write and the things that we've learned from reading, blah, blah, blah. Mental process, it's not emotional, but we make it so because we believe in the muse. The reality is, unless our arms have been cut off and we don't own that dragon naturally speaking, right. It's just there are a million ways, excuses we make for choosing not to, but we are always able to write. And so, but people are always like, I can't write today because I have writer's block, or I can't, just isn't speaking to me. And I think it's more productive if we start rephrasing not to write today because I'm depressed. I'm choosing not to write today because I'm just not feeling it. To write today because Stranger Things just came out. Whatever. And there might be a little bit of guilt involved in beginning to talk. Realize that the factors that control our productivity, they're internal, not external.
Yeah. I think definitely you hit it. I choose not to write. I choose not to do this. And yeah, you should feel guilty.
Valid reasons. I choose this because I just can't look at Terry's beard anymore. Might not be as good a reason.
I don't know. Have you seen his beard lately? I think I really love your idea of the
Awesome.
8 minutes, your 8 minutes, 200 words thing. I find that very, very interesting because I know that would work for me in a lot of ways. And the thing is like, okay, I usually write like an essay or something every day. It's just pouring out my thoughts, stuff that never gets published. More than half the time, I don't podcast or put it up on my blog. It's just me clearing out the furniture. And sometimes that's all it takes to get started is to basically put down word one. And it doesn't have to be anything to do with your story. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting into that click of getting those thoughts down, get them clear your head, just scrub the walls, get all that shit out of there so you can move on. Even if you don't work on that story that day, you still wrote. And that's the important part, is just keeping that routine going. And I am just as guilty as anyone else on the planet of not listening to my own advice. So sure. We're all there. We're all hypocrites. We know what we should be doing. We choose not to do it. We're adults, damn it. So yeah, yeah. The Muse, yeah, hell with the Muse. That person never liked me anyway. Yeah. I laugh about somebody who told me that there was some other writing podcast out there where these two writers were opining about the fact that it took them, and sometimes it takes them an entire week to write a paragraph. And what the fuck are you doing?
Well, I mean, that is a choice you can make. And maybe that's more of an artist thing, but I know with my podcast, who hope to be commercially successful in indie fiction, I don't think spending a week on a paragraph is going to get you there.
Yeah, paragraph a week.
My goals are, I would not advise that.
No, I don't advise it either. I think even if you're trying to be artistic, do something non-commercial and etc., I think you're really holding yourself back by thinking that that's the amount of time you should spend on a freaking paragraph or anything else, because you're not going to improve as a writer. And you only improve as a writer by writing. So even if it's crap, write it.
Is that paragraph really that good after a week's work? How damn good would a paragraph have to be to represent a week's worth of work?
I don't know. Because I'm the literary voice on this podcast, so to speak. Not that I write literature, but I have a great appreciation for it, unlike my co-host, that scumbag. But even so, you go back and you read some of these works and you're kind of like, why in the fuck is that there? Why, it's like Marcel Proust can go on for 35 pages describing a bush. Why? Were things really that boring in France at that time? What the hell's wrong with you?
So I just do easy low-hanging fruit.
Phrasing again. You just sit there and you go, why? Okay. And it's basically giving you the history of this bush, all the things that happened at this hedge, but it's great, but it's self-indulgent crap is what it comes down to. And I that's just my personal opinion. while I appreciate what he was trying to do, it did not work for me at all. And I can say the same thing about some other artistic novels, so to speak, that are in the annals of literature, but I don't think they really belong there. That's just me, because some of those folks were, I mean, Dickens was basically writing spec fic of his time, and he was getting paid by the word. We don't get paid by the word anymore.
The 20th century American novel class in college, and it was really fascinating because the professor by some of the greats, but they weren't the ones that you hear about as being their best. Really great class. Some of the ones he presented to us were just fantastic.
Yeah, that's another funny thing about an author. You can, and this has happened several times. There are some people who are like, "Oh, you got to read this book by Stephen King. How can you not have read that?" And it's like, when you finally do read it, you're like, "This is actually kind of a letdown compared to his other stuff." And that happens with writers all the time. My favorite book by John Irving is A Prayer for Owen Meany, and I hardly ever run into anybody who's a John Irving fan who loves that book as much as I do. And I can do the same thing with Ray Carver. There are certain stories people love from Ray Carver. Well, my favorite's Cathedral, just is. So that's not always going to make everybody's top 10 lists. They want to talk about, they want to put up the things we talk about when we talk about love, rather than my beloved Cathedral, those bastards. So there's always something there to be said, that a writer, it's just taste, right? This is the book that caught the critics' attention and therefore got all the market, but that does not necessarily mean that's their best work for you to read.
Right.
So,
like The Old Man and the Sea, I don't think that's close to Hemingway's best book.
No.
It's not his best.
I would say it borders on self-indulgence in the extreme, but that's just me. This is the guy who's, self-indulgent. So my number two is belief what I'm writing is shit, which we talked about earlier, giving yourself the right to suck. And
you seem to have a theme going with a lot of yours.
Do I know? Yeah. There is. It is. There absolutely is. I think that has to do with the coming out of a writing program and all the accolades, winning scholarship essentially for writing, and thought I was hot shit, and then discovered no, I really wasn't. So it's trying to live up to what you intend to be rather than what you are, which is you're just some schmuck putting down words. That's really what it comes down to. And it is very difficult for me to remember that, and I have to keep pounding it into my head over and over again that, hey, you're allowed to write shit. And then you find out from other people, I really love that. And it's like, okay,
yeah,
all right, I can't trust myself. All right, great. So I'll just write whatever. It's kind of like, the street.
Well, if you're writing for other people, then it's not up to you to judge whether or not this is shit, because it wasn't written for you. And for other people, they get to be the final arbiters. And that I have a career. I think I write light, fun stuff that I would like to read, but to the best writers out there. But it's pretty good for my genre, and for some reason, to read it that all the time. Sense of it most of the time. I think I'm pretty mediocre.
Well, it's like Terry says about his space opera, he's writing what he loves to read.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it works so well, is he's writing what he loves to read. And I'm trying to write, I guess, the stories I wish existed. So, I have this idea, I want to go after it, and I want to find a way to make it, interesting and compelling, and have a lot of fun with it. But at the same time, there is that commercial aspect where you have to sit there and go, is this way too far out in left field? So there is a little bit of a, business decisions going on now where there didn't used to be. And I know that the kind of stuff that I really, really, really love to write is not commercially viable at all in any stretch of imagination, the way I would want to write it. So now I have to kind of make some concessions here and there for, what I write when I write it. And that doesn't mean I'm going commercial. I mean, Gears Inferno did not start out to be commercial. It just ended up that way. We'll see how well it does when it gets published. But I've think I found the middle ground between the two things that I can feel like I'm not writing crap completely, and that is also going to be stories that folks want to read. So, but I'm still writing for me. I'm just worried about the endings for the rest of you. So what's your number one, man?
And this one is definitely the one that is for me, not knowing what I'm going to write that day. It could be that my outline wasn't good enough, or much more so before I started outlining heavily, I might have a vague idea, okay, it's going to be this point of view, and I kind of want this to happen. Prepared. That is when I have my most struggles. That's when, on an emotional level, I don't feel like writing that day because I just don't know what I'm going to do. To succumb to the distractions, and that's when I might make the excuse to just that day. And so, having these thorough outlines and having really worked through all my BS and done my pantsing in my outline form has helped a lot. I know a lot of people said they're worried that they would be bored actually writing the book if everything was so thoroughly planned out. But to me, it's such a good feeling to know exactly what the emotional lift, sit down and start writing without any more forethought, any agonizing. That's a big deal to me. And I still can do some embellishing and make some little changes as I go. So yeah, preparedness for each day's writing, already knowing what I'm going to do, makes a big deal to me. Big difference.
I guess maybe that's why I put those chapter markers down. And sometimes I'll walk away from a chapter in progress. I'll walk away in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah.
So it's really easy for me to come back and complete the sentence and start the next paragraph or continue that paragraph. Sometimes I figured out little strategies like that work. I just have to remember to use them all the time, which I'm really bad about. So it does help to know what it is you're going to accomplish that day. Absolutely agree with you. And sometimes you just have to find your way in, and that means you can go work on something else and come back. So, I mean, I'm going to give myself the license to basically say, okay, I don't know what's going on in Derelict. Let me go work on Signal Decay, and come back.
Yep.
And I did that with Gears Inferno. Destruction wasn't working, so was having all those problems with it, and was like, fuck it, I'm gonna go finish this other book. Just gonna go finish it, get out of my head, get it out of the way, be done with it, so I have another success and can come back to this thing. And it worked.
Yeah, I would say finish whatever you switch to, though, or vice versa, but don't just constantly jump from book to book, which I know some people do.
That's the other. We have had co-hosts on this show who were constantly switching back and forth and never finishing anything, and that is a different problem, and that is definitely something that I think is really, really difficult for writers. Some of them, anyway, is to actually get something finished. And then, of course, you have to abandon it. I mean, it's done. You edit it, you get it to where it needs to be, and then it's done. You don't go back and keep futzing with it for the next 12 months. Why do it? So I think that there are those points that I know there are people that do that, and maybe it works for them, maybe it doesn't, but it certainly wouldn't work for me. I don't want to revisit my old
succumbed to that one time.
What now?
When I did some Dane Manic book bundles, I decided to do some work on book one. I just feel like I'm so much better a writer now. And so I didn't do too much, but I did expand what I thought were some weak points. I added a few bonus chapters and it up, except I've ruined my Whisper Sync for my first book of my series.
How dare you?
Yep.
Your
disadvantages.
Yeah, I would think so. My number
All right,
one.
what's your number one?
My number one is my dog. She's sitting over here sleeping right now. This is usually what she's doing, sitting here sleeping. However, I'll be sitting down, and every 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, this nose starts bumping my elbow. And it's the dog. The dog wants to go outside. The dog wants food. The dog wants the WALK. I can't say that word right now because she's right here. The dog wants this. The dog wants that. Then there are the cats. Right now, they're both sitting over here in this chair, and they're so dark you really can't see them very well. Even though there's a pair of eyes I can see in the corner there. They are the kids, and they're always causing trouble, and I'm always having to deal with them. So, what I figured out works though is treats. Just give them treats and let them go away, and they gain 30 pounds, but they stay out of your hair.
Okay, my dog hasn't been that big of an impediment, but my younger daughter, when she was about 3, I almost stopped writing. Working full time, I was working on my master's. My dad was dying, so I was doing things for him, and I taught martial arts, and I was coaching the girls in sports. So I was really, really busy. Anyway, and she could be in bed, but if she wanted a drink of water, she would get up, walk right past the bedroom on my way out, interrupt. Or if it were the middle of the day, once again, she'd walk right past mom, come out to where I was writing. I don't know what it was, but yeah, she drove me bananas for about a year where I really had trouble producing because for some reason it had to be me to answer all her questions. And she just had this subconscious knowledge of what I was writing, and she interrupted it every time. I would be gritting my teeth while I was starting because I'm like, Aaron arrives in 10, 9, 8, just craziness. So
I will
kids,
I
yeah.
will be on a roll and going forward, and then my day job will pay me about something, and it's like shit. I have to stop everything, go over work on that to get that where it needs to be, so I can count that money for next month's rent. And it can really kill you. And there were 2 days where I was planning on writing both days, and then a minor emergency turned into a major emergency, which turned out not to be an emergency at all. But I lost basically 16 hours of potential productivity time, and it was bad. And I hated myself for having been put in that position. It just made me want to just say, fuck it all. It is really galling when you start to get in there, and then suddenly something completely drags you out when you're not ready to be dragged out. But real life happens. It just does.
And that's why I really encourage that commitment to, no matter how bad my day is, I'm going to write fast for 8 minutes. 120 words a day in an 8-minute session, that's 80,000 words a year. Working minutes a day to your writing.
Yep, and that's a book.
So, if nothing else.
And there will be those days where that 200 words turns into 1,000. So, yeah. Small goals, achievable goals, very achievable goals. The smaller, the better. Well, I think that covers that.
I'm getting boring by now.
Yeah, probably. So if you disagree or have a comment to say about our top 5 or how we explain things, or you just want to yell at us, you can send an email to show@deadrobotsociety.com. You can tweet me at Paul_E_Cooley, or you can join the listeners of the Dead Robot Society Facebook group. Hey, I actually said it right this time, where all the crazy happens. I think we have 600 something members. I don't remember. Anyway, lots of.
It's also where the inappropriate memes get posted.
Yes, all of David Wood's wonderful internet Photoshop work you can see there in all of its glory. I'm sure Terry Mixon, dressed up as a pink hippo wearing a tutu with stars behind him, is coming in the next few days or something. Yeah, join us there. Lots of crazy discussions going on there about the business and writing specific things. Lots of good stuff there. Come join us. And we would be remiss if we didn't thank our wonderful host, pod hoster, for making all 400 billion episodes of the Dead Robot Society available for your ear holes. If you want to help support this podcast and our YouTube channel, you can become a Patreon patron for as little as $1 a month, where you can get access to early podcast episodes or the unexpurgated, unedited version of this episode, for instance, of video and audio, as well as invites to exclusive live shows. So go check us out at patreon.com/DRS podcast. You can check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/DRS podcast. But before we go, I have to mention our $10 and above patrons, who at this time are, slackers that they are, Robert Slade, Caleb, that's not cream in your donut, James, Nathan, the real Paul E. Colley Petty. I think he meant Cooley, but who knows? This is my favorite. This wins the month right here. Drew, leaf blower choir conductor Bernardi.
Yes, that's pretty good.
For those of you that know that I record my own audiobooks, leaf blowers, lawnmowers, and planes are a constant source of irritation. So, Drew, that was good. I hate you. John Kilgallen, Chris Winder, Isabel Cushy, Andre Conde Moraes, DJ Chamberlain, Jonathan Zarusin, J.R. Handley, and Sue Bayman. So, as always, thank you very much, patrons, and we appreciate your support, and it's wonderful. And we also appreciate you, oh listener and watcher of the YouTubes, for joining us for this. David,
talk to me, so hey.
Yeah, exactly. David, it was a pleasure having you on here. I can't believe I said that sentence, but it was awesome. And hopefully we'll have you back again in the future. We're no longer using Burger King internet.
I am always around.
Yeah, don't threaten me like that. All right, folks, we'll see you next week. Bye.
See ya.